Today I'm covering the menu, and I am not going to bury the lead on this. This is one of the best movies I've seen this year, and it's important for me that you guys know that I take that type of ranking very seriously. It's not just my preferred properties or genres or things that I like to see. For me to rank a movie as being objectively good like this, the mechanics have to be sound, the experience has to be accessible to a lot of people, the movie has to know what it's trying to do, and then it has to do that well. And that kind of gives you a even playing field to rank a lot of different types of movies off of. This movie knows exactly what it's trying to be. It is a satirical black comedy. The movie is overflowing with commentary on the relationship between those who serve and provide commodities and those who consume them, and the relationship between commodities and art. The movie is written by Seth Reese and Will Tracy. Seth Reese was a head writer for The Onion, so satire runs through his veins. Will Tracy writes for Succession, which I haven't seen, but I've heard is really good. And I think it's just really interesting how when you take talented writers with a history of successful products and put them together, they're capable of coming up with something that's not just competent, but it's artful. Now that's in stark contrast to what Hollywood normally does, which is prioritizing selling tickets by putting all of their money into the visuals. They just need actors with name recognition, and they need really killer CGI. The writing, the substance, the story doesn't matter, because by the time you bought the ticket, it is too late. And that gives an avenue for all the nepotism and cronyism that goes on when producers take the writing positions and just dole them out to their deadbeat nephews. The first reason I love this movie is because it is so different. It is not like any plot you've ever seen, and it has a whole bunch of new and interesting types of interactions, builds tension in different ways. It provides horror and suspense in a lot of different ways. It isn't explicitly one thing. It pulls from black comedy, it pulls from horror, from suspense, pulls from comedy and satire, but it's not like this forced amalgamation like when a toddler just crams together limbs from different action figures to make this monstrosity. That's kind of an old hacky move that's pretty easy to identify when people take successful properties and just make small changes. This is actually like a new thing. I'm a huge fan of black comedies, and I feel like they're hardly ever done. One, because they're dangerous. It involves laughing at things that people might take issue with you laughing at. So those tend to be off limits these days. Two, it's also very hard to do black comedies well. This movie does it extremely well. It gets very dark, very grim, very serious, and it never shies away from the subtle punchline because the entire movie is satire. The main reason I love this movie is because it is different. It's unique. The whole premise of this really established, sought-after chef hosting a private dinner with a bunch of wealthy socialites and actors and regulars, and then trapping them and forcing on them this extreme type of performance art where he gets to get his recompense against those who he feels has slighted him in his art, but also gets to kind of go out with a bang and give this one big last performance. It's really interesting. And then you have Anya Taylor-Joy's character, who's like the outsider. She's like the punk rock girl that doesn't really know what the big deal is about all the food. She's not really supposed to be there. And there's this really interesting tension between her and Ralph Fiennes. Second reason I love this movie is because, like I said, it knows what it wants to be and it does it well. Now, the commentary really has to do with those who serve versus those who consume. And there's this kind of overlapping relationship between commodities and art. Ralph Fiennes' character is very much an artist, and he's fed up with serving his art to people who don't appreciate it, because all of the consumers of that type of art are frauds and charlatans and leeches. They're people that either are part of the industry that is centered around criticizing or reviewing food, or they are part of this kind of social strata where they have to be kind of on board with the next cutting edge thing. And all of the work and thought that he puts into his craft goes completely unnoticed. There's also this layer of him being a food service worker who is feeding the bourgeoisie. I really enjoyed Nicholas Holt's character, who is Anya Taylor-Joy's date, going into the event. He's the one who brings her along. She has no idea what's going on. And he is this obsessed foodie. He's the guy who is a nerd, who is over the top. He's trying to isolate every ingredient and every dish, and he's constantly trying to get the chef's validation. And it turns out that he is just yet another poser. He's somebody who can't cook his way out of a paper bag. As somebody who constantly has to deal with frauds in the fitness industry, I can relate to that, because there's a lot of people that have read all the books, but when it comes down to brass tacks, aren't really capable of coaching a little league team. Now, this movie does have horror elements and suspense elements, It is shockingly not bloody or violent. Halfway through the movie, I had to stop and think if the movie was rated PG-13 or R, because there was just an absence of slasher visuals. There were plenty of really disturbing scenes, but it just wasn't heavy on the blood and guts. But the attention that it didn't give to that, it instead gave to the slow boil that picks up as this mystery builds, as people try to figure out what's going on. Is all of this real, or is this just another demonstration of one of the world's greatest artists? So I really recommend this. I mean, Ralph Fiennes is just fantastic. He has range, no doubt, but in some of his better performances, he relies just on his presence, his face, his demeanor. He's a character like Denzel Washington or Anthony Hopkins, who tend to bring themselves, their natural personality to the script, and everything they do is amazing. And I think Ralph Fiennes is one of those characters. He has this complex presence. Part of it reminded me of Red Dragon, the Hannibal Lecter movie where he played the serial killer. He's stern and he's very imposing, but he's also a little off, but he's also a little vulnerable. And it's this very weird dynamic that makes him a character that you show a little compassion for, but at the same time, there's no doubt like this is the bad guy. Anya Taylor-Joy is becoming one of my favorite actresses. I don't know how much raw talent she has, but she has a presence that is very interesting and captivating, those big eyes on screen. It adds a lot to the stylistic element of some of the movies she's in. She did very well to play the kind of aloof, like, I don't give a fuck type of character. And that added so much to the movie because so much of it was the dynamic between this chef who is used to having all of these other people in the palm of his hand. They're all lemmings who are like part of this cult. And then you have Anya Taylor-Joy, who's the outsider, and she doesn't hesitate to check the chef when he's out of line, to complain about the food, to say what the hell's going on. And it was really interesting to watch that pushback. And if you've ever been involved in a scenario where there is a lot of blind allegiance to somebody, even outside of like a rigid hierarchy, if you go into like some social circle where somebody's getting a lot more clout and respect than maybe they've earned and they're abusing it a little bit, it's always interesting and kind of exciting and a little frightening to see somebody stand up and puff their chest out and try to challenge that social hierarchy. So there's this very much visceral tension you feel, like you can't do that, don't, like he's the chef, you can't challenge the chef. Then there's this whole other dynamic of the cult-like following because the chef has his own cult. He actually makes his cooking staff live on the island in a bunker that looks like a suicide cult. That's one of the first scenes you see. And the film makes them seem like these like psychotic cult followers because they're so in lockstep with what he's doing. They're like under his spell. They almost look like they're hypnotized. And there's this dynamic between them and the audience, the consumers that they're imposing themselves on. But the way the movie comes full circle is it demonstrates really artfully how all of these consumers are every bit as much a part of this cult, and that they end up going in lockstep with all of the horrific stuff that goes on. So that was another interesting bit of commentary. It was kind of pointing out the relationship between those with influence and those who have the zeitgeist in the palm of their hands, and everybody else who are like flies around a flame, who are trying to, you know, get closer and closer to what's in right now. And they all become, even though they're the ones that are suffering at the hands of this unhinged chef, they all fall in line just like every member of his cooking staff did. Like I said, the movie has layers. It moves through them very well. It is very accessible, even if you don't care about the social commentary. If you think it's pretentious or obnoxious, the movie is funny. There's a lot of obvious, clever points. The movie is tense. It is genuinely frightening. Every time he comes out to get his patron's attention, Ralph Fiennes does this clap that it's jarring. Every time you hear it, I've heard it compared to a jump scare, and I think that was a really accurate portrayal. So the movie does so many things so well, and it does them at the same time. It's a juggling act. The writers are very talented. My hat's off to them. Yeah, that's all I got. Best movie of the year, The Menu, by far. So that's my recommendation. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.